years. I mean, that was a regular part of my life. I would spend a long time looking for songs.
When people talk about the explosion of Beatlemania, they often point to the screaming fans, the packed stadiums, and the headlines declaring the Beatles the most important cultural force of their time. But before the hysteria, before the world tours, and before the band reshaped modern music, there was a single recording session that changed everything. George Martin, their producer and mentor, later admitted that this was the song that opened the floodgates, the moment he realized that the band's destiny was no longer in question. In 1962, the Beatles were still an unproven act. Their first attempts to win a recording contract had failed. Decca Records had rejected them outright, dismissing their style as unsuitable and their future as unpromising. By the time George Martin at EMI's Parlophone label agreed to give them a chance, the group was desperate to prove themselves. Martin himself was skeptical. He was a seasoned producer who had worked with comedy records and orchestral pieces, not raw rock and roll. He didn't see four scruffy young men from Liverpool as the next global phenomenon. But Martin was sharp. He had the instinct to spot something in their charisma, their humor, and above all, their determination. Still, instinct wasn't enough. The band needed a song strong enough to break through, something undeniable. That song came in the form of Please Please Me. Originally written by John Lennon as a slow, blues-inspired ballad, the song wasn't particularly striking. Martin himself thought it dragged. He challenged the band to push it harder, faster, and brighter. With that change, the track transformed into something electric. Suddenly, the energy was contagious. Paul McCartney's harmonies lifted Lennon's vocal line. George Harrison's guitar punched through the mix, and Ringo Starr's drumming provided a heartbeat that drove the track forward. When Martin heard the final take, he immediately knew they had it. This wasn't just another pop single, it was explosive. Later, he would recall that this was the moment everything shifted. The floodgates opened, and there was no turning back. Released in January 1963, Please Please Me raced up the UK charts. The BBC couldn't ignore it. Radio stations played it endlessly. Fans who had only heard of the Beatles in passing suddenly took notice. The single hit #1 on several major charts, and for the first time, Lennon and McCartney realized they could write hits at the highest level. More importantly, George Martin realized he wasn't just producing a pop act, he was guiding a cultural movement. The aftermath was immediate. EMI rushed the Beatles back into the studio to record a full album. The result, Please Please Me, was captured in a single marathon day of recording. The urgency, the rawness, and the unpolished energy of those sessions became part of the magic. It was the sound of a band hungry for success, riding the momentum of a breakthrough single that had kicked open every door that had once been closed to them. Martin's role in all of this was critical. He was the one who challenged Lennon to rethink the song's pacing. He was the one who insisted the band could push harder and sound more urgent. Without that intervention, Please Please Me might have been just another forgettable track. Instead, it became the trigger for Beatlemania. The British press soon latched onto the frenzy. Photographs of screaming girls, packed theaters, and fans chasing the band's car became daily news. By the end of 1963, the Beatles were no longer just another British act. They were the act. And it all tied back to that one song, the one George Martin called the real beginning of it all. As the group's career accelerated, Martin often looked back on that moment as the turning point. The Beatles would go on to produce albums of unparalleled innovation, from Rubber Soul to Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's, and beyond. But in his eyes, the song that proved their potential, the one that forced the industry to take them seriously, was Please Please Me. The irony is that the track almost didn't happen the way we know it. Lennon had originally been inspired by Roy Orbison's slower, dramatic style, aiming for something moody and aching. Without Martin's insistence on changing the arrangement, the song might never have carried the energy needed to catch fire with listeners. This demonstrates the unique partnership between the band and their producer. Lennon and McCartney provided the raw material, but Martin had the technical vision to shape it into something marketable without stripping away its originality. That partnership would define their career. While the band grew more confident in the studio, constantly experimenting and pushing boundaries, Martin remained the steady hand who could translate wild ideas into professional recordings. In the early days, however, he was more than that. He was their validator. When he declared that Please Please Me would be their first #1, the band believed him. And when he was proven right, they knew they could trust his instincts. What followed was the wave of Beatlemania that swept across the UK and soon the United States. By 1964, with I Want to Hold Your Hand and their appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show, the phenomenon became global. Millions of fans screamed, fainted, and rioted to catch a glimpse of the band. But the seed of that hysteria had been planted the moment Please Please Me broke through. George Martin wasn't exaggerating when he said the floodgates opened. The band had gone from regional favorites in Liverpool to national superstars almost overnight. The story of that song is more than just the story of a hit single. It's the story of how timing, collaboration, and creative risk can change everything. Martin could have played it safe and allowed Lennon's slower arrangement to stand. The Beatles could have folded under pressure after previous rejections. Instead, they seized the moment, reworked the song, and delivered something that couldn't be ignored. For Martin, Please Please Me became a benchmark, not just for the Beatles, but for his career. He had worked with artists before, but nothing compared to watching a band ignite a cultural revolution. Decades later, when asked about the origins of Beatlemania, he pointed back to that session. It wasn't their later masterpieces that sparked the movement. It was the raw, urgent energy of their first true hit. For the Beatles, it meant everything. That single gave them the confidence to experiment, to take bigger risks, and to challenge the industry. Without it, their trajectory might have been slower, or perhaps never as impactful. With it, they were unstoppable.